Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. Welcome back, everyone, to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Tonight, I am joined with a special guest, Mr. Freddy Rivera. Freddy is a talent acquisition specialist, a real estate investor. He has a career spanning over 15 years in corporate America, from startups all the way to the largest corporations in the country, some of which have worldwide footprints. He has an amazing skill set, incredible work ethic, and we've gotten to know each other over the past few months as part of the Action Academy Mastermind group, which we are both a part of. We just returned a few weeks ago from a trip in Costa Rica where we met 40 of the other members, and he has such a cool story. I just couldn't wait to bring him on. So without further ado, here is the interview with Freddy Rivera. All right, welcome everybody to the very first interview on the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. I am here with Freddy Rivera, and I am grateful that he has agreed to be my first guest. So first, I would love to have Freddy just introduce himself in his own words.
Yeah, Aaron, congratulations on starting the podcast. I know we were talking about this in Costa Rica, so just really happy for you. And secondly, thanks for having me on. I know that this is something you've been working on and talking about. Just really excited how you're going to crush it and all the people you're going to help as well. And then to answer your question, to introduce myself, I'm Freddy Rivera. I'm a real estate investor. I've been doing it since about 2008. I was a junior in college when I first started. We could talk a little bit more about that, of course, but for the last 15 years, my W-2 has been a tech recruiter, program manager, or a combination of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, global program manager as well. And just leveraging some of the skills you learn at work in corporate America and in your W-2 to translate that to your investing. And I work for Amazon, Google, Hulu, Disney, stuff like that. Also for some startups as well. And I've always had my eye on whatever it is, Zillow, Redfin, Facebook Marketplace, stuff like that. And we met obviously in a group recently that's about scaling and doing things in a strategic manner. And again, that lends itself to probably your W-2, my W-2 as well. Just really happy to be here. And I just personally really enjoy real estate. It's something you can touch, you can see, you can be proud of, totally within your control. And part of the reason why I like to focus more on real estate rather than the stock market or crypto or NFTs or whatever it is that's going on right nowadays. But that's me in a nutshell. I started out in house hacks, and we can go into more detail, but that's me in a nutshell.
So Freddy is the epitome of a hybrid real estate professional, at least by the definition I go by. He has a long, wide-ranging career across a number of different size companies. He's worked as a coach and a mentor too. He's worked as a recruiter, a program manager. So all sorts of skill sets he's drawing from. And of course, he also is interested in real estate and use some of the more common strategies to get started. I would love for you to dive into the origin story of how you even became interested in real estate and just how you got your first property.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a little different than a lot of people. And still to this day, and I'm sorry to admit this, but I've never read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know the concept. I know what it's about. I agree with the majority of what it says in the book, right? But I got started in real estate because I think I read a book called like Mortgages for Dummies or Real Estate for Dummies, one of those, or for beginners. I forget. There was like two versions back in the day. I don't know if they're still around, but I just started reading the stuff and I'm like looking at Zillow when it started coming out back in the day.
When was this?
This is around like 2005. I think I was graduating from high school. So some folks are probably doing the math, right? It's all good. And you just start looking at folks and how they build wealth, right? And I used to work at a bank. I was a teller, and I could see the people coming in, paying their mortgage and et cetera. And I would ask a lot of questions, just make a conversation. Some people have 10 transactions they do or versus one. And you start asking questions, and I have a loan officer that's also in my branch, and I started asking him questions. So I think I caught on pretty quickly that you can accumulate wealth through the acquisition of real estate, whether it's one a year, two a year, three, whatever it is, right? Whatever makes sense for you. And it just seemed like such an insurmountable mountain that I just chipped away, I guess, at it. It wasn't systematic. It wasn't with like scale, like how you and I are, and all the folks in our group are trying to think. But I think I was just so focused. I just want a house because I want my own place because I grew up in like class C, class D apartment housing, things of that nature. And I just thought it was so cool to have your own house, do whatever you want to it, take down this wall and open it up or whatever. But the financial aspect was always really intriguing because I was never a car guy. I learned pretty quickly, you buy a car, you drive it off the lot, it's already 5-10% lower in value. But a house, depending on the economy or what's going on, it can only appreciate in value over a long enough timeline. So I read that book. I think I got it from Barnes and Noble. My dad took me. I was one of those dudes in the aisle reading a book before I bought it or reading like half of it and just great. Like I think I gleaned enough. But that's how I started really. I just saving money, taking some of the money even from my loans or FAFSA that I had saved because I did side hustles. Like I would buy a whole set of books for the class at a discount, but I would sell it $20 cheaper, $15 cheaper than the bookstore. I hope the cat listening. And from that money that I would save, I would put that away towards a fund in the hopes of getting a house. And when I started doing the math and just asking around, I figured out, hey, you don't need to have 20, 30% down, right? You can get by with 5 to 10. And when I was ready, it was, I think, towards the end of the crash of 2008 or somewhere thereabouts. And I discovered foreclosures and real estate owned and things of that nature. And I said, hey, these are at a discount. Let me look at this. But I didn't look at it as a business. Again, I looked at it more as this is my home, my dwelling. I wish I would have kept going. I wish I would have met somebody like Aaron Amistegi, right? Who we got the pleasure of hearing from because that's his bread and butter. But that's how I got started. I found an agent. I found an area that I could look in, I could afford. I looked at my credit. I think I had 2 years worth of credit. At that point, I was like 20. I think I was 20. Yeah, as a junior. And I just thought, hey, if I look for somebody with a pain point in a bank, REO or bank owned or for pre-foreclosure, I more than likely could get a deal. And just given that back then, they were giving out what my professor at the time called ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets, ninja. That was it. I don't know that he made it up or whatever, but I still remember that. And I just thought, hey, let me look at a few houses. I looked at about 5, 6 of them. I put in an offer for one. I didn't get that one. I put in an offer for a second one. And it took about, I want to say 4 to 6 months, but it kept on appreciating, but the price was locked in, which is really in my favor. Through that, my mom and I, we were able to get the first home. We house hacked that. And then I got about 5 to 6 more single family housing. And yeah, that's how I got into it. You get it, you get the asset, you rent out some of the rooms, and then you basically either are rent free or at a very reduced rent, but people are paying your loan down. Your equity is in your pocket, right? And obviously it sounds easier said than done, but that's how I got into it basically.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, house hacking is one of the greatest tricks in the book, and it's still a valid entry point and probably the best entry point for most people. A couple of things you said stuck out to me. One, you were flipping books in college, which is amazing. Shows your entrepreneurial mind, but also it just shows the way you were thinking about money, right? You understand that it's an exchange. You're learning to perceive value. It's obviously at a different scale, but buying a book under value and selling it at the actual value people are willing to pay for it. Same principles apply when you're looking at houses. So I also want to highlight the fact that you were only 20 years old when you were getting into all this stuff, reading through the books in the aisle and just had a thirst for that knowledge. And this was 2005, you said? Was
Yeah,
when you
I
began.
started. Yeah, I bought in April of 2008. Yeah, that's when the first deal closed.
Yeah. So this whole time, Twitter was founded in 2008. Right now, like in this day and age when people are getting started, they have such an advantage because there is so much information available. It is not hard to find out about all these loan programs. There's gurus every which way you look, but there's also just a lot of free information. So I would say it's even more impressive that you're able to find this stuff out in an age where information was not at your fingertips. The iPhone came out in 2007, right? And I was in high school around that same time. And I remember it was different. Learning things was different back then. And so I take my hat off to you that you got in at an early age and figured stuff out on your own. So you mentioned you bought 5 additional single family houses after that house hack. Were those also house hacks or did you have a different strategy?
So they were a mix of house hacks or partnerships. And typically the other partner was going to be the house hacker, if you will. And we would split the equity, or it was somebody that usually for me, it was somebody that was going to be the house hacker. And I guess I was teaching them how to do it, but really I was looking at it not in a scalability or this could be a mastermind or a program, because that's not words that I knew back then. But it was usually somebody that needed a house. And I was like, hey, there's a strategy. Here's a way to do it. And I would just replicate what I was doing with more of an emphasis on helping them, but then generating some equity and cash flow, right? The only problem with that is sometimes you don't vet somebody out well enough and they want their money before our proposed exit or when it's advantageous to us or something like that. So that also became a hindrance and a bottleneck. But most of the time, it was either I was living in it and I would rent out the other rooms, or I was doing it for like a buddy or somebody that I knew or somebody referred to me. And I would just teach them how to do it or what to look for or how to prepare. And then they would go on and do it themselves.
Very cool. So yeah, partnerships, I'll admit I have not actually done one myself at this point. I'm starting to look into them a lot more. But my wife and I, we own 8 rentals across 3 different states, and we bought them in a various different ways. Most of them were off the MLS. A couple of them were off market through the agents that we had worked with before. But we honestly, to date, have not done a lot of these creative strategies. And so I'm now opening my eyes to just how amazing partnerships can be, especially if you're able to bring knowledge and experience to the table, which it sounds like you figured out pretty early on in your journey. Where are all of these properties?
They were mostly in the state of California or the state of Washington. The ones in Washington were really interesting because, again, I know that you lived in like central Washington, I believe, right? Or,
Yeah.
yeah. If you live in Seattle or you're familiar with that area, you have people in Seattle and then you have people, what is that? East of there, north of there, and south of there. If you go west, you're going to hit the water, right? There's not that many houses on the water unless it's like a boat or something. So for me, and again, to this day, I think this year is when I really got official, if you want to quote unquote say official, and knowing what underwriting is, knowing what path of progress is. But I was just going based off of intuition and saying stuff like, Seattle's too expensive for me. And I'm not going to go out into the woods and Sammamish and Snohomish and stuff like that. Pardon me if I'm saying any of those incorrectly. But I had bought in what is called Linwood, Washington, which is about 2 hours from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. You got to say all the words, right? You got to say everything. And I just thought, hey, there is what do you call that? Like a shuttle to take you into Seattle for work, which I would take every morning. And I just saw people are getting priced out of this general Amazon, Google, Seattle area. And then you had Redmond, which is Microsoft. So I thought, let me go north. There was an airport being built, a regional airport being built in my area. There was a train being built that way as well. And I had another colleague that he bought there as well. So I just thought, hey, let me buy. I'm going to stick around for another 2 years, which I did. And then let's see in 4 or 5 years, let's see what's the area like, because it was a new construction, the one that I got. And it was also something that I thought we don't have enough homes in the area. And again, this is all just based off of intuition and what I knew. I didn't do any comps. I didn't do any underwriting, anything like that. And luckily it all worked out. But it was a combination of here in California, like more what you would call, I don't know what you would call it. It's inland empire, more inland, away from the water, away from like LA, downtown, things of that nature. So it was a lot more less competition, little bit more repairs. I would focus on stuff that wasn't turnkey, but it was not too far away from it, or maybe it was like abandoned for whatever reason and they just didn't finish the work. I would try to focus on properties like that because again, either I was in school or I was working. And at the time I was like traveling somewhat because part of my job was to travel and I didn't have the time to like project manage. I didn't have the time to walk the site and stuff like that. It was either me doing the work or it was me just getting somebody that I knew that could do the work for me. So I just tried to figure it out. But my thing back then was I wasn't scaling and I didn't even know that word, right? That's something you discover at your W-2 and metrics and OKRs and KPIs, right? So it was just something based off of intuition and just, hey, I think this is going to work, or let me look at the newspaper and see what other rentals are going for, and then just averaging it out. And yeah, I think this will work. And based off of the deal you can get. So yeah, there were mostly, like I said, California and Washington.
And you know what? Those markets now are stratospheric pricing, right? If you bought at any point between that 2008 and now, I don't even know what the percentage is, but most of these West Coast markets are just off the charts. And yeah, so you mentioned some of the growth in the Seattle area, not to focus too much there, but just for reference, like now the border's getting pushed up further and further, people are getting priced out further and further. So when you can spot trends like that, okay, there's a regional airport being built here, there's a train, those are signs. And it is generally smart if you invest near or around those areas. And now that's happening in other cities around the country too, right? Some of the cities that used to be considered tertiary markets are becoming secondary markets, and secondary markets are trending towards primary markets. So it's not easy to spot trends before they happen, but you can observe some of those things, like you said, with intuition. It's not all on a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's about just living everyday life and like looking around you and seeing what's happening. So you were working full time throughout all of what we've discussed so far, right?
Full time. Yeah.
And you said you were traveling a bit. So how did you balance? So obviously you're passionate about real estate this whole time. You loved learning about it. You're getting creative. You're doing partnerships. But how did the balance work? Because you accomplished a lot and you grew in your career. You were good at what you did. That doesn't happen by just coasting and not caring. Like you obviously put some time and energy into your work too. So tell me, like, what did a day in your life look like when you were doing all this stuff at the same time?
Yeah, it's funny to reflect on it now because we talk about right now, wake up early, do miracle morning and so on and so forth. But my morning, instead of waking up at 8, 9, getting into work 9, 10, I was waking up at 5 a.m., getting a workout in, and then getting on my BlackBerry. When like you said, the iPhone, I think you said came out in '07. I had a BlackBerry. So I was just on my BlackBerry, replying back to emails for work, checking my inbox, whatever that Yahoo account was. If I got any reply back from an agent or somebody that posted something and I said, hey, I'm interested to learn more. So I would check that. But yeah, I was working a lot. I was working a ton. I think what really helped me, honestly, was just figuring out, hey, how can I automate things? What can I do to move this along, but I don't have to actively touch it. So I would scan my inbox for stuff like, is this a reply or do I have to take action and do something? If it's a reply that's going to hold up the process, I would answer those right away. And if it was something that required me to sit down and think and like work on something, I would save that for when I got in the office. But because by the time I got in, I had already done maybe an hour or two of work. And I could have peeled out by maybe 3, 4 p.m., but I would still do my work, continue doing my work. And I would just do the same thing after work. I would either go to a Starbucks or if the building allowed it, I'd go to a different floor and just use again my BlackBerry back then because I didn't have a laptop. And I didn't want to use my work laptop, right? Because that's another thing you don't want to do. But I would just do it in the morning, do it in the evening. And then on the weekend, I sometimes would stay home to save money and not go out and watch NFL Sunday like all day. On the West Coast, we have the 10 a.m., the 1 p.m., the 5:30 now game. So I would just stay home, and in between plays, I would literally start looking on my BlackBerry, maybe iPhone eventually when I got it, but I would just do that. And honestly, what was really challenging was both at work and in my personal circles, I was the only one doing that. I was the only one kind of looking at that because everybody around me, professionally and personally, either was not interested in buying a home, or it was this, again, this huge mountain. And when I was at school and I would tell people like, yeah, I got a house, and it wasn't the best reaction. So I just kept it to myself. And yeah, I did partner with people, but I should have I should have done a little bit more. But you learn, you live and you learn, and like you progress. But yeah, it was just getting up early, getting work done, and then whatever free time you have, it's you step away, you answer it on your own time. And it's just doing whatever it takes to get that deal or close on that house so that you can make some cash flow basically, or whatever your goals are, right? If it's a hold like appreciation play, then that's going to be your strategy. But it was just finding the time, and it was just automating what I could so that I could have my own time to work on my own stuff.
It's really interesting. So you're using a lot of phrases that we would normally use today, but you're talking about a time that was 10, 12 years ago, which is, I think that's like actually you're ahead of your time with some of the strategies you were using. So like even just triaging your inbox in the morning, like that's a trick a lot of people do now. A lot of people have like folders and whatnot, but like that little trick probably saved you an hour a day or 2 hours a day, like you said. And between that and then some of the sacrifices you made, like you said, skipping out on NFL Sundays or not going out on a Friday night, you were passionate about real estate. You knew there was something there. Obviously, like we've said, you didn't have the vocabulary. You weren't talking about it the same way we do these days, but you knew something was there was merit in the strategy you were pursuing. And I just want to like key in on the fact that there is an intuitive feeling, right? Like when my wife and I started investing, we didn't, I also did not read Rich Dad Poor Dad until 2 years ago. And we started investing 6 years ago. Even though that's a very popular, common book, it is not a prerequisite to read that book before you start investing. But we invested because it felt like we were building something for our family. And that was important to us. Just like you said, you and your mom, that first house hack, you had a house, a place you could call home, something that was your guys' asset. So I think it can't be stressed enough that like connected feeling, and go into it with that in mind. If you want to learn the fundamentals and all that, I absolutely think you should. But it really helps when it fits organically into the arc of your life as well. So
Yeah, 100%.
you are a married man. When did you meet your wife, and how have you guys gone on this journey together? Do you guys invest together? Do you guys partner in any way? Family is one of the themes of this show, so I'd just love to hear how you approach that.
Yeah. If we really want to get technical, I did meet my wife in middle school. It was seventh grade. We had some weird like cooking class that they were trying to teach us. There were like baby dolls that you had to take care of. I wasn't allowed to get one because I was a guy and we didn't have enough. And but that's where we met. We met in seventh grade. We went to high school together. We really didn't know each other. We would go out off and on as 20-year-olds and etc. But it was when I was living in Seattle where you're old enough and you're mature enough to have an actual communicative conversation, right? And luckily, she was the one who kind of initiated that conversation, and the rest was history. We started dating, we got engaged, we eloped during COVID, and we've been married. It's going to be 3 years in December. In terms of us investing, I think I was the one that was investing just because, again, I was the one that was thinking about these things, doing all this stuff. And like a lot of folks that are first generation, because I am first generation here in the States and in college and et cetera, so is my wife. So I think she was a little bit later to the game. And I've just been feeding her information, answering questions. And I think now moving forward, I think it'll be her and I investing together, which is really exciting for me because I really like this stuff and I've been liking this stuff. It's just, again, part of the group that we're a part of, it's a lot of like-minded people, but when you don't have that, or you don't have that partner that you can consistently bounce ideas off of, it gets a little lonely, it gets a little hard. And sometimes you revert to what the 20-year-old kind of mind wants to do, right? And travel and do things of that nature. That's part of why I'm like, man, I really wish I would have kept going or thought bigger, right? But you're the kind of, what is it, the result of the people that are around you. Having my wife now, she actually just joined a group. She's learning kind of the fundamentals so that we can do something here in the States, hopefully in Latin America as well. That'll be very community focused as well. But she's always been supportive. Since we've gotten married, I've sold a house, my house in Linwood, which I mentioned earlier. We can certainly talk about more about that. But I've also gotten into a limited partnership, or what we would call an LP syndication, for I think it's 76 apartment unit building in Pennsylvania. But she's always been supportive. She asks a lot of questions, which are great, things that I don't think about. But I think moving forward, we will be doing some stuff together. And she's really good at creative and just the design aspect and the interior of the house. And then I'm more of the operations, systems, deal, financing, that kind of thing. So I'm really excited about that, just because it's been, I don't want to say hard, but it'll certainly be a new challenge to work with my wife and do stuff like that, because that's what I've been wanting to do, but it wasn't what she wanted before. And I think she's finally come around, because the stock market is great. Crypto, some people have done very well, and there's other different things out there. But like I said, to me, real estate is something that has several tax advantages. And again, you have a sense of ownership and pride in your house, whether you own it, rent it, or Airbnb or something like that. So there's several ways to make money and cash flow. So really stoked about that. But moving forward, we will be doing that. And I think we're going to try to take down like either some sort of fourplex, or maybe like up to a 10 unit, 12 unit apartment building or something. We'll see what it comes.
That's killer, man. Yeah. So you had some partnerships earlier in your investing career, but the greatest partnership is obviously a marriage. And it must be exciting to just explore and watch her go through that discovery too and get more interested in it. My wife and I talk about money a lot. She trusts my vision, and generally speaking, like I never make a big decision without her. I never make any kind of big moves without really, discussing it. I think you mentioned, right? Like sometimes she asks questions to me that I haven't thought of. And some of that is because I'm really deep in it all day, every day, thinking about this stuff. And she can sometimes like have a fresh perspective that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. And those challenges are good. But I'm also like, it comes in seasons, right? We have an almost 2-year-old daughter, and we have twins on the way later this year. And so we've also been building a family, and there is a lot of time and energy that goes into the process of building a family too, right? So for my wife, it is a lot about, we have to spend, we divide and conquer at times, where we're like building our family life and building our financial family future. And we oscillate between those at times. So it's not easy to slice it all up. And I'm not sure if or when you plan to have kids, but it's great. You guys have laid an amazing foundation for whatever you choose to do with your life. And it's great you guys are now getting to partner a little more closely. So tell me about, so she joined a mastermind. Was that your idea or was that her idea?
Right. It was my idea. And it was a suggestion, right? Because it has to be what they want too. It's not just about what I want, right? And it took her a little bit to get out of the mindset of just doing a W-2. She enjoys what she does to a certain extent, but you go to work you leave your house 7, 8, 9 a.m., you come home 6, 7, 8 p.m., right? And that gets old after a while, especially when you're, like you said, you're married, you might have children, other obligations, right? She finally was open to it, and she just literally joined today, which I'm super stoked about, because it's also a good group, a good organization. And yeah, I know she's going to do really well, because honestly, not to like oversimplify things, but like you said earlier, once you know the fundamentals, once you know the basic concepts, and then once you get over, you're signing a piece of paper worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but if you have good fundamentals, if it's you have good math, good underwriting, you're really trusting the numbers, and it's not just about the dollar amount, right? It's something that it was my idea, but I think it took her some work to get there. And I'm just happy that she's going to be going on that same direction so that we can do that together. Because I don't know how you feel. I'm pretty sure you feel the same way, but doing so with your partner is just really fun. And sometimes I've traveled, I'm sure you've traveled too, Aaron, but sometimes you're like, man, it'd be really cool to go there again, but with my partner. And that way we can experience it together. Or Costa Rica, or where we just were at, right? We were in an area where I had been before, but it just is different because I'm experiencing it with her. And we were in Mexico City, we were in Costa Rica, and it was really interesting because in Mexico City, particularly, there's a lot of houses or apartments for sale that usually are like Airbnbs, etc. And it was her asking questions or making observations that we arrived at, like the idea we think that is going to be good for her in the future. But I wouldn't have seen it that way. I wouldn't have thought about it that way. So yeah, it's exciting, but at the same time, it's now there's going to be two of us. Like we were talking about partnerships, you can do a lot more with the same resources, but it's just going to be two people. So it's really
Yeah.
exciting.
So let's touch on the international component. So obviously you said you're first generation. So do you hold investments internationally?
Yeah, I have a place in Nicaragua where my family's from. I have a place in Peru where my family's from. I don't, yeah, yeah, I would say so. I don't think of it like that. I don't think of it as a business, but it does have the capability to make money. It's just not my money. I do it more for my family. One of them, they have an office space in the front, which my grandma operates with the help of my uncle, and they rent that out. So that's something that we've set up. The other one would be if you've ever been to Lima, Peru, which is the capital of Peru, you build upwards. So if you have a first floor, a couple years later, a couple decades later, you're going to be up to 4 or 5 floors. So there's an apartment floor or two that they're able to rent out. And again, it's something to sustain the family so that they're not reliant on remittances from like the United States from us or something like that. It's something that we're able to, what's the word here, monetize instead of just to a family friend or something like that, and provide a good experience and then hopefully scale that up. But yeah, so those are the two places that I have.
That's amazing. I want to be clear about one thing, right? An investment is not just about money. Like you said, you have these properties that, yes, they're producing money, but they're also producing so much more intangible value for your family. I'm sure they hold a sentimental place for you, with that being where you're from. Investing in general, to me at least, is not only about money. Like I mentioned before, the first house we bought as a rental, we bought it because it was something we felt we were building for our family and for our family's future. So I think it's really nice to hear that you have those real tangible assets and connections to places that you are from. That's really cool. So one thing we didn't talk about yet, which I'd love to touch on, is your career. And so you, again, you have this wide ranging career. You got a lot of skills. And I believe you even were in a position where you were managing and mentoring and helping people out. So what are some of the skills that you feel that you actually used in your day job that really helped propel you in real estate?
Yeah. And I love your point about it's not just about money or ownership. There's also, before I kind of address that, because I think we're talking about a really good point, and I think something that people don't really think about, which is home ownership isn't just cash flow or it's this is mine, but to all the people listening, if you live or have lived in an apartment building, what are you thinking about at the end of your lease? Is my rent going to go up? And if you have a mortgage or own a home, unless you're going to increase the rent on yourself or your loan changes or something like that, it's not going to change. And I think that's something that we overlook. There's also the tax benefits of it. Um, there's also I think the thing we don't talk about enough, which is if you buy a home, you invest money in the exterior, the interior, the value goes up, but so does it for the neighborhood, right? And as the neighborhood gets nicer and nicer, it's just better for everyone. So those are some benefits that I always think of. And honestly, it's always really great to just work on your home and put some sweat equity into it as well. And obviously, I don't know about you, but going on YouTube and figuring out how to install all this or how to like do stuff like that. It's very gratifying when you can figure it out, right? And it doesn't end up you calling somebody to fix it. So I would say that's something that we don't talk enough about. And then appreciation as well. That's what I always tell folks, especially about California. Hey, it's expensive. You come for the weather, but you stay for the appreciation if you can hang on long enough, right? Because like you said, like the prices have gone up so much. But in terms of my career, so if we're talking about talent acquisition, which is a fancy word of saying recruiting, it's attracting talent and making sure that my approach was always this. I wasn't selling anything. I was just merely talking about an opportunity and then hopefully matching that to the right person so that we can bring them in and they can make an impact. And then the company, whatever it is, the product, the feature, the value of the company itself would grow, which is similar to if I have a deal, I'm not selling like, hey, I got this deal. This is an opportunity for an investment, and here's what the return you're going to get. And I think I subconsciously always thought of it that way. So to give you an example, if I was recruiting for some job at a huge tech company, just to speak very generally, if I was going to recruit off of the big three, Bain, BCG, and McKinsey, I wouldn't be saying, hey, you're going to be making this much money and you're going to get unlimited food and what have you. I would talk about stuff like, so why are we on the phone here? What something's obviously missing. What is that? And I would do that in a roundabout way, but that was very direct. And hey, we're on the phone for a reason. I reached out to you, but what brought you on the phone with me? Oh, I'm traveling 60% of the time and my kids are of a certain age and my wife is also my wife or a spouse or husband is telling me X, X, and X. And I do a lot of the recommendations and research, but I don't do the implementation. From that, you get to pick out like family time, spouse or Mrs. or Mr. And then at the same time, they want to be a lot more involved in the product lifecycle. So it's great. So then you start talking about the opportunity and then you get them interested. But at the same time, you want to make sure that there's a match, right? Same thing with if I'm looking for a business partner or a private money lender or something like that, you have to have a match in terms of how you want to work. When do you want your money back? That kind of thing. That's like some skills that I would bring over. And again, I'm just discovering this now because now where I'm thinking in terms of systems and scalability and things of that nature. Another thing that was also very helpful is, again, in talent acquisition and especially being a recruiting manager, you working backwards, right? If you have an offer, how many interviews, we would call it an on-site interview back then. This is pre-COVID. Like how many people do we have to fly in to get that one offer? For every one offer, we had 3 people to get to the final round. For every final round finalist, you have to get 5 to 10 people on the phone with the team. And then before they got to the team, I had to do 15 to 20 interviews or something like that. And then as you track that through the years, you're like, okay, great. I have this role again. I know what I need to do and just execute. But now I've done it before. So then let me try something different. So it was a matter of working backwards, right? And I did that also for like program management. Hey, we need to launch this program. Great. When do you need to launch it by? I need to launch it in a quarter. Okay. And then now we have to have a trade-off discussion, right? I guess that lends itself to great. You want a certain price. I want certain terms. And you're like trading off from there, right? And being in talent acquisition or just, again, the nature of the job as a recruiting manager or as an individual contributor, you're on the phone a lot. So being on the phone, I feel pretty comfortable being on the phone with folks. And there are days, I'm sure you've had this, where you're on the phone back to back. And while that's very tiring for some, it still is for me, but it's something that I've done countless times. Sometimes, again, I'm on the West Coast, so I have to deal with people on the East Coast or the Midwest. They're not working West Coast hours because for them it's 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. when it's earlier for me. So I've gotten used to that, but I've also gotten used to working with different people because being from HR as well, I work with people who are senior vice presidents, people directly reporting to the CEO, all the way to individual contributors. So you have to tailor your message, right? And as you recruit for people who are earlier in career versus people who are later in the career, it's a different kind of conversation. And funnily enough, on the phone, I'll spend 30, 40 minutes with someone earlier in career, when as it's later in career, it might be like a 15, 20-minute discussion and it might be more conversational, right? So there's that. And then also just value proposition. I think that's something that is something that I don't want to say I'm perfect at, but it's something that I've come across as something that I've leveraged a lot with. Hey, we want to run this pilot, and this is the benefit of running the pilot to you and your business and the metrics that we're going to impact. Here's the budget that we need. Here's a project plan. Here's a communications plan. And those are all things that I'm incorporating into my business now where, hey, if nobody knows you have a business, you're not going to have leads. And if you don't have leads, you don't have a business, right? So it's just thinking about things holistically and being able to do that in a plan that we're marching forward instead of marching left, up, down, and just packaging all that up and being able to provide value to folks. And I would say that too. That's something, again, subconsciously that I've always operated with, which was, you don't know who I am. I'm in this team. I'm in this role. Here's where I can add value to you if we build a good mutually beneficial partnership. Because being in recruiting, again, as an individual contributor or a manager, everybody wants to hire. Everybody wants to hire people. And if I'm in a company that has like several subsidiaries, we're not necessarily talking to each other. And when you're not talking to each other, you're not sharing candidates, you're not sharing leads. But I was the one that was like, hey, I think this person would be a lot better for you. And you do that enough with the right people, it starts to become a two-way street. And again, which leads itself to what we're talking about and doing today, right? Where you want a partner, and if you help people, they're going to want to help you. So these are all things, again, from the W-2 that I carried forward, and just make sure to systematically approach something versus just putting a bunch of offers out there, right? And not thinking about it, a system and something that I can repeat instead of just one and done, that type of thing.
So many good skills there, right? Like recruiting people. So not only do you have, like you said, the lead tracking, have to put out this many offers, I have to fly in this many people, or sorry, interviews to fly-ins to offer, just like a pipeline. It's similar concept as in most sales jobs. So you're getting that kind of sales type experience. You're learning to read people. You're learning to understand people. You probably, I know you didn't say this, but I'm guessing you had a good detector for BS. If
Yeah.
somebody was lying or embellishing in a way, you could probably learn to sense that pretty quickly. And I call that out because in real estate, we have to build teams, and building teams, contractors, property managers, agents, and not always the most honest people, unfortunately, in this business. So just building that sense of being able to understand people and understand that. And the work back schedule was the other thing that really stuck out to me too. So you had the work back schedule for your offers, you had the work back schedule for your projects, and just trying to understand, okay, if somebody says they need something by next week, being able to negotiate with them and say, okay, if you need it by next week, this and this is going to either have to change or go. And that is a hard skill. It's a type of negotiation, but it's also a type of just be realistic and working to deadlines. So I also just want to highlight that you worked this career path and these jobs while you were building your real estate career, and they really complemented each other because you're getting active income, you're getting your salary, you're building the skills, and you are building the real estate. It's not to say you can't build a successful real estate portfolio without a career, but I've got to imagine that those things running in tandem was extremely powerful. And now at this juncture in your life, if you should decide that you want to make a change and go further into real estate and farther from career, you can do that because you've already gained those skills and you've likely invested a lot of time and money into the real estate. So speaking of what's next, what is next for you? So I know you launched your own podcast, you're building your own business, you're exploring different parts of real estate. Give us a glimpse into what you think your life's going to be like a few years from now.
Yeah. And I like how you call out the BS part because, and somebody reminded me of that. It's good to listen to folks. It's good to reiterate some of the things that they're saying and then leave the assessment of what you heard for later, which is what I did as well, right? I type up my notes and then I'm like, yeah, I see something or not really, right? And that goes, like you said, for contractors, for the team that you have to build up. But What's coming next? I think for me, I've been able to do this kind of weird wholesaling thing, which honestly, if there's any recruiters listening to this, wholesaling is basically recruiting just with houses instead of people and careers. So if there's anyone in your network that has a question, please reach out because it's very similar. But I need to refine that just because averaging 15 to 25 calls, let's just call it, that's what another person in Action Academy said. It's a big wheel to turn and it's a lot of time investment. So I need to figure that out. But I've been partnering buyers with wholesalers and then managing that transaction because it's very foreign to people, right? It's not a retail transaction. So I think that might be one. Another one might be land flipping with another member of Action Academy. We want to do that. And then again, through networking and just being around like-minded people, we probably have a bunch of V2, V3 ideas. But again, not to get too ahead of ourselves, probably that. And I would say investing with my wife, maybe some multifamily on the smaller side, maybe 4 to 20 units, stuff like that. And in the future, we'd love to get some more international properties under our belt and under our management and do that in a way that provides, like, number one, an authentic experience based off of where that Airbnb is. And then also help out the community of vendors and maybe teach them about e-commerce and how to get on Instagram to market themselves or something and stuff like that. So I think that's what's coming next. I think I might be missing something. Oh yeah, mobile home parks. That's something that I also want to get into because you don't really think about it, but mobile home parks is sometimes the first home that a person is able to obtain depending on where they live. And that really jazzes me up about real estate. I'd probably say land flipping, a little bit of multifamily on the smaller end, and then mobile home parks as well. This is probably the three things. And the reason I'm doing three things is because I'm partnering with somebody in each. And at the same time, I'm just leveraging the part of the process where I fit in the most. And it's complementary to the other person, which is really important for partnerships, right? It's if you have two people that do the same thing, you have an extra person basically. So that's my focus for the next 24, what is that, Q4 of 2023, and then hopefully into 2024, but with the aim to systematize it and then step away and insert other resources or other people through partnership so that I can think bigger or worry about the lead pipeline or closing or something like that.
Very cool. Would you say it's accurate to say that the single family homes that you built early on in your investing career, you've held most of those? I know you mentioned you sold one in Linwood, but would you say building that baseline has now given you the skills and the confidence to expand into these other sectors of real estate?
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Because one of the biggest things that we don't talk about enough is, again, signing that paper and taking that loan on, right? And once you do it once, once you do it twice, it's no big deal. It's no different than you signing for that car or whatever it might be, right? It's just at a bigger scale. But fundamentally, it's the same transaction. And once you get over that mental hurdle, if you will, and you know the basics, or hey, there's a big shopping center, there's transportation nearby, you can walk to fill in the blank, bars, restaurants. You start seeing real estate, you start seeing housing a little bit differently. And like anything to do with education, nobody can take it away from you. So that's what I find the most powerful about it because real estate is all around us. And once you again get over that mental hurdle, it's really all about numbers, arithmetic, and like you said, building out that great team. Because even as I was doing this by myself, I still needed people to do certain things for me. Although I did learn how to drywall, I did learn how to install a window, I did learn all that stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, I wish I would have partnered more on that front because my time would have been better spent looking for another deal versus learning how to do all that. I was trying to learn how to do flooring with my uncles. And my uncle was like, "What are you doing? You should spend your time doing something else." And so it's really refreshing to just hear it from different people. But yeah, I would say so. It's not hard. I think the hardest part is the mental part and maybe saving. But other than the mental part, I'd say the other big thing that, in my opinion, is the biggest hurdle is delaying gratification, whether it's that vacation, that clothing, that car. It's delaying the gratification so that you can bear the fruits a little bit later. You're just delaying it, but you're getting it twofold, threefold, sometimes, you know, a lot more than that. But it just depends on what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And it's not only the delayed gratification financially, but we talk about skipping those NFL Sundays and going to Barnes and Noble instead of the bar. It's not always easy choice to make, especially early on, but this has been such an inspiring story. I think I couldn't have picked a better guest to come on for my first interview on the podcast. I really appreciate your time here. I want to give you a second to plug yourself. Where can people find you? Where can they find your podcast? And what would you like them to connect with you about?
Yeah, I would say if you just have questions or if your story's similar to mine or something like that, you can feel free to DM me it's a lot of Instagram. So you could DM me at Vamos, VAMOS_Fred. You can DM me at the_Vamos, VAMOS_podcast. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. If you LinkedIn Freddy Rivera at Vamos Enterprises, you'll find me, or the Vamos podcast. You'll find me on LinkedIn. And I'm just leaving people with, if I can do it, if Aaron can do it, certainly anyone listening here can do it as well. And honestly, it's not as hard as what you're making it out to be. And Aaron's a really great, I'm pointing to you like if you're right next to me, if you're watching YouTube. But Aaron's a really great guy. He's very passionate about this. And, if you have questions or if you want to partner with somebody, Aaron's a really great guy to partner with, because I even I think you either posted this or you showed it to us, but it was like, it'll take X amount of months. And if we don't get it in X amount of months, we'll keep going until we get it. And I just thought that is very you. And it makes me very happy for the people that are going to be partnering with you, right? Because you stand by your product, you stand by your experience and your consultative background, which I'm sure you can talk about a lot, but I'm just very excited for you and the people you're going to help. It's going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
I appreciate that, man. And I'm very excited for you as well. We get to connect in our regular masterminds and work towards our collective goals. And I can't wait to have you back, hopefully in a few months or 6 months down the road, and hear what kind of progress you made towards all these exciting things you're working on. So thank you for spending some time with me this evening. And I'm excited to put this episode out into the world early next week.
Right on, dude. I'm pumped. Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.